They tried to tear him down on live TV. His answer changed everything. The email landed in his inbox late in the afternoon. It was short and formal. It came from the producers of the Morning Exchange, one of the country's top-rated talk shows. They wanted Darius Bell, tech entrepreneur and CEO of Innovis, to appear on their next segment about diversity in business. Darius had seen this pattern before. Big media suddenly remembering black business owners exist, giving them a few minutes of attention, then quickly moving on to the next hot topic. But this time was different. Innovis wasn't just some new company. They had just secured a multi-million-dollar defense contract, beating out some of the biggest players in the industry. That wasn't luck. That was the result of 20 years of hard, tireless work. Still, he paused before agreeing to go on the show. Something didn't sit right. His assistant, Tasha, noticed, "You sure about this? You know how these shows work. They love to show off a success story, but they love destroying one even more." Darius leaned back in his chair. "I can handle it. Besides, it's national exposure. Let's see what they have to say." Tasha sighed, shaking her head. "Just don't let them trap you." He nodded, though deep down he knew the game. If they were setting him up, they picked the wrong man to play with. On the morning of the interview, Darius arrived at the KXNT studios in Los Angeles. The green room was cool and quiet. A young producer greeted him without much interest. "Mr. Bell, thanks for coming. We'll get your mic on in 5. No small talk, no warm welcome. Just a quick, cold process." As he sat in the makeup chair, an assistant dusted his face with routine, almost robotic care. On the wall, the studio monitor showed the live broadcast. A panel was debating celebrity scandals. Then came a cooking segment, and then the transition card. Coming up next, the black tech boom. Is IT Town, Oregon special treatment? Darius tightened his jaw. So, that's where they were going with this. If they thought they had the upper hand, they were in for a surprise. But he didn't yet know just how far they would go. The Morning Exchange set was made to look warm and welcoming. Soft blue and gold colors, a clear glass coffee table between the host and the guest, cameras floating quietly like silent judges, catching every move, every glance. Darius straightened his jacket as he sat across from Madeline Royce, the show's lead anchor. She was known for asking hard questions. She smiled, but her eyes stayed sharp and distant. "Darius Bell," she began, her voice smooth and practiced, "CEO of Innovis, a true American success story." Darius nodded politely. "Appreciate you having me." She leaned in a little, flipping through her cards. "Let's get right to it. Your company recently won a $200 million government contract, beating some of the biggest names in tech. That's impressive." Darius knew this move. First, they build you up, make it sound like they admire you. He answered carefully. "It was a long process, but yes, we did the work. We built a security encryption system that outperformed the competition. Simple as that." Madeline crossed her legs. "Some are calling it groundbreaking." A brief pause, but others have questions. Darius didn't blink. "Questions?" She picked up another card and read it out loud. "Some in the industry say Innovis got a boost from certain federal diversity programs. That companies like yours have an advantage because the government wants to work with more diverse suppliers. That maybe this wasn't just about who had the best product, but about filling a diversity quota." There it was, the real reason he was there. Darius let a moment pass before answering. "I've heard that before. It's interesting, though. When a black entrepreneur wins, it's called special treatment. But when the same old companies, run by the same families for generations, win those deals, no one says a word." The mood in the studio shifted. Off camera, producers glanced at each other. Madeline stayed firm. "So you're saying race had nothing to do with your success?" Darius gave a soft laugh and shook his head. "Let me ask you something. When SpaceX won its NASA contracts, was it because Elon Musk checked a diversity box? When Jeff Bezos landed government deals for Blue Origin, was it because of his background, or do... We only seem to ask that question when the CEO looks like me." Madeline's face barely changed. "So you don't think these diversity programs help?" she asked. Darius calmly folded his hands. "They help make things fair. But what people forget is the game was never fair to begin with. But Madeline wasn't finished. She had something else planned. Her smile sharpened, smooth but dangerous, like a hidden blade. She glanced at her cards, then back at Darius. "Well, let's talk about that playing field you mentioned," she said, her voice now a little colder. "You grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Single mom, public schools. Worked your way up from nothing. That's inspiring." Darius slowly nodded. He could feel where this was going. "But here's what some people might ask," Madeline went on. "How does someone with no Ivy League degree, no family connections, go from a tough neighborhood to landing contracts that billion-dollar companies couldn't win?" She let the question hang in the air. The message was clear. How did you really get here? Who pulled the strings for you? Darius tilted his head slightly, choosing his words carefully. "It's called work, Madeline. Some of us don't have old family money or country club friends to open doors for us, so we build from scratch." Madeline nodded a little, as if she heard him, but she wasn't really listening. "But surely you had help along the way," she pushed. "Maybe a mentor? A program? Something that gave you a boost?" Darius let out a quiet breath. "Yeah, I had help. I had 3 jobs while I earned my engineering degree. I had help when I had to sleep in my office because I couldn't afford rent while building my first software prototype. That's the help I got." For a brief second, her lips tightened. The producers behind the cameras leaned in, fully hooked now. Madeline shuffled her cards again. "And yet, some people argue that black entrepreneurs today have more chances than ever before. That programs like affirmative action, minority grants, and government support exist now to open doors that used to stay shut." Darius leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You know what's funny? Whenever a black business owner makes it, people always ask, 'What programs helped you?' But nobody ever asks which old money bank funded a white-owned startup. Nobody asks which family connections got them into Stanford, or which golf buddy gave them their first investment." He paused, letting that sink in. "The truth is, success isn't something you win in a lottery. People like me had to be twice as good just to get a seat at the table." The air in the studio changed. There was a quiet tension now, as everyone realized they were witnessing something real. But Madeline didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, the kind of smile you see when a chess player thinks they've trapped their opponent. "That's an interesting point," she said, her voice smooth and calm. "But let's look at another side of this. How people see your story." She turned a little toward the cameras. "Darius, you present yourself as a self-made success. But let's talk about public perception. Some say that black entrepreneurs actually get an unfair advantage when it comes to media attention, that stories of overcoming struggle are more attractive to the public than the thousands of white business owners who work just as hard but don't get the same spotlight." Darius gave a soft chuckle. "Oh, so now the problem is we're getting too much attention?" Madeline's smile stayed perfect, but her slight shift in posture gave her away. She wasn't expecting him to laugh. "You're telling me that in a world where 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs are white men, where most tech funding still goes to white-owned startups, the real issue is that people like me get too much press?" Madeline gently tucked her hair behind her ear. "I'm simply pointing out that in today's world, some people feel there's pressure to highlight diversity over pure talent." Darius sighed, shaking his head. "Talent, right." He briefly glanced at the cameras, then looked back at her. "Let me ask you, Madeline, do you really believe that if I wasn't great at what I do, I'd be sitting in this chair right now?" Her mouth parted like she was about to speak, but before she could, Darius kept going. "Do you really think I'm here because I played the diversity card, or because I made it in spite of everything that was designed to keep me out?" The silence in the room was louder than any question she'd asked so far. But Madeline still wasn't finished. She had saved her biggest move for last, the one meant to break him. She took a slow breath, shifting in her chair just enough to seem casual. But Darius noticed it, a small crack in her polished front. She glanced at her card again, then carefully set them aside. This next part, she wanted to say straight to him. "Darius," she began, tilting her head slightly, "I can tell you care deeply about this, and I respect that, But let me ask you something. Darius nodded, waiting. You think some of this outrage is overblown? She asked, pausing to let it hang. After all, your success proves that the system isn't as rigged against black entrepreneurs as some people say. The nerve. Darius could feel the heat rising in his chest, but he didn't show it. Instead, he let out a soft laugh and shook his head. You know, he said carefully, it's funny how people love using one success story to prove there's no problem. Madeline's smile stayed in place, but something flickered in her eyes. Darius leaned in a little, resting his forearms on his knees. Let me put it like this, he said. If one person escapes a burning building, do you point at them and say, see, the fire wasn't that bad? Madeline started to respond, paused, then shut her mouth. Darius wasn't finished. The fact that I made it doesn't mean the system isn't broken. It just means I had to fight twice as hard to get through it. His words settled heavy in the air. Even the studio crew had gone still. Madeline shifted in her seat, searching for the right response. I understand where you're coming from, she said, her tone shifting into that calm, neutral voice people use when they're trying to manage fallout. But let's look at it another way, she said, turning slightly to face the cameras. Some people might say your frustration isn't really about race. Maybe it's about your criticism of big corporations. After all, you've been very vocal about tech giants not hiring more diverse leaders. Darius tilted his head. Frustration? No. Accountability? Absolutely. Madeline's lips pressed into a thin line. So what would you say to those who believe that in today's world, success is based on hard work, not race? Darius let out a slow breath. His eyes locked on hers. This is the part, he said. This is where people love to believe fairy tales, especially when they're the ones who benefit from them. The silence rolled across the set like a slow wave. It stuck. It stayed. Let's be real, Darius continued, steady and sure. Black entrepreneurs still get denied business loans at double the rate of white business owners. We still receive less than 2% of venture capital funding. And even when we prove ourselves, we still get asked whether we actually earn our success. Madeline sat perfectly still, hearing him, but not really listening. So let's stop pretending the system is fair, Darius said, calm but unshakable. It isn't. And the only people who can't see that are the ones the system works for. Silence. Not the usual kind of TV silence. This was deeper. This was real. The producers didn't cut to commercial. The control room didn't step in. Everyone in that studio knew this moment was bigger than the script. Madeline shifted again, for the first time showing a little discomfort. She parted her lips to speak, but Darius wasn't finished, because this was the moment that would ripple far beyond the studio walls. Madeline cleared her throat and glanced toward the off-camera producers, maybe looking for backup. But none came. This was hers to sit in. Darius adjusted his watch, letting the silence grow just long enough to make people feel it. Then, leaning back in his chair, he exhaled. You know what the real problem is? He asked, his voice now softer, but heavier. Madeline hesitated. What? The bar isn't set in the same place for everyone. She shifted in her seat. Meaning? Darius said, a mediocre white man can keep failing upward in this country, but a brilliant black man has to jump through flaming hoops just to get a chance. Off camera, someone quietly cursed. They knew this was going to explode online. Darius kept going. A white CEO can crash a company, bankrupt it, lay off thousands of people, and still get another top job somewhere else. But when a black CEO has one bad quarter, it suddenly becomes proof that we weren't ready to lead. Madeline opened her mouth, but Darius wasn't done. And here's the best part, he said, letting out a dry chuckle. When we finally make it, people like you sit across from us and ask if we got here because of some special advantage. Silence. Madeline's jaw tense, barely noticeable, but the camera caught it. Darius leaned in just a bit. Firm, not aggressive, but final. You wanted to talk about fairness, he said, letting out a soft, bitter laugh. Then let's start by telling the truth. Another silence. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable, it was powerful. Madeline's whole expression had shifted. It wasn't just the studio watching now. It was the entire country. Darius slowly turned toward the camera. I know what some of you are thinking right now, he said. Some of you are nodding because you've seen this, you've lived this. He held his gaze. And some of you are sitting there, frowning, arms crossed, telling yourself this isn't real, that I'm just playing the victim, that it's all in my head. His lips pressed together for a moment before he finished. But deep down, you know I'm right. The room was completely still. Then the producer's voice finally crackled over the speakers. All right, we need to take a quick break. Madeline forced a polite smile. We'll be back with more after this. The camera is cut, but the damage was done. Within an hour, clips of the moment were everywhere. But the real storm was just getting started. The clip hit social media like lightning. By the time Darius got his car, his phone was blowing up. Text messages, missed calls, notifications pouring in. Twitter was on fire. Darius Bell just called out the media's bias on live TV. This was powerful. Hashtag truth hurts. The way he looked right into the camera and told America the truth. Chills. And Darius was right. But not everyone agreed. Here we go again. Another millionaire pretending to be oppressed. Cry me a river. Stop playing the victim. Wow. This is why people don't want to hire activists. Race card all day, but hard work speaks louder. Cable news picked it up within the hour. Some called him fearless. Others called him angry and aggressive. By lunchtime, the Morning Exchange had already released a carefully written statement. We believe in open conversations and hearing different views. While today's discussion became more intense than expected, we remain committed to fair dialogue. That's what the Morning Exchange posted. Darius read it and let out a quiet laugh. Fair. Right. His phone buzzed. Tasha was calling. Her voice was half laughing, half in disbelief. Do you realize you just set the internet on fire? Darius rubbed his forehead. That wasn't exactly my plan. Well, congrats, she said. You're now the most talked about entrepreneur in America. He didn't answer. He knew what came next. Viral moments don't stay moments. They turn into battlegrounds. And the next 48 hours were going to get messy. But this wasn't just about him anymore. By the next morning, the story had gone beyond social media. Cable news picked it up. Op-eds filled every major news site. Everyone had something to say. Fox News. Is Darius Bell the new face of corporate privilege? CNN. Darius Bell's viral moment. A wake-up call for America's merit system. Business Insider. What Darius Bell's interview really says about race and success in America. Meanwhile, Madeline Royce was scrambling. On her show the next day, she gave a carefully prepared response. I respect Mr. Bell and what he's achieved, she said, but I stand by my questions. My job is to ask what the public is thinking. If those questions were uncomfortable, that only shows why they needed to be asked. In other words, she wasn't backing down. Darius watched the clip from his office, shaking his head. Across from him, Tasha scrolled through a flood of emails. You know, she said, we just got a huge wave of new investor offers. People suddenly want to work with us. Darius smirked. Let me guess, the same people who wouldn't return our calls last year? Tasha shrugged. Guess being controversial is good for business. But not all the news was good. Some clients backed out. A major partner quickly decided to review their agreements. And then came the threats. Emails, phone calls, even a package left outside Innova's headquarters. Inside, there was only one thing, a single sheet of paper with one word, written in bold. Enough. Tasha read it, frowning. You need security. Darius rubbed his temples. He'd seen this coming. Whenever a black man speaks too loudly, too directly, this is the cost. But walking away, that was never an option. Now, he had a choice to make. Would he let the backlash quiet him? Or was this just the start of something much bigger? Darius sat in his office, looking out over the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The last 72 hours have been chaos. Praise, criticism, threats, and new chances. His mind went back to the boy he used to be. The kid from Birmingham who had to fight for every step forward. The one who watched doors close in his face while others walked through wide open. And now, here he was, in the middle of a national conversation he never asked for but couldn't avoid. Tasha walked in, her face unreadable. "We just got an offer." "From who?" Darius asked. She set a folder on his desk. "A network. They want you to host a televised special, a deep conversation about race, business, and how the system really works." Darius let out a slow breath. "So now they're ready to listen?" "Looks like it," Tasha said with a faint smile. Then, after a moment, "What do you want to do?" He leaned back in his chair, thinking. He could walk away, let the noise fade and go back to business as usual. Or he could use this moment, not for fame, not for attention, but to speak the truth no one wanted to say out loud. He picked up the folder, flipping through it, then closed it and looked at Tasha. "Tell them I'll do it," he said. Her eyebrows lifted. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Yeah, but this time it's going to be on my terms." Because if the system was going to shine a spotlight on him, he was going to control what that light showed. Darius Bell's viral moment wasn't just another trending story. It was a reckoning. It cracked open a conversation people had been avoiding for decades. About race, about success, about who's allowed to rise without question, and who gets questioned when they do. Some called him an activist. Some called him arrogant. Some called him right. But one thing was clear. No one could ignore him now. So what do you think? Does real success mean playing by the rules of a broken system? Or does it mean rewriting those rules completely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe more stories like this need to be told, subscribe